All right, we'll just give everyone a chance to join. Yeah, I can see people starting to filter in, which is great. All right, so I think we'll make a start. Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy Carradine. I'm the Operations Manager for the U.S. Supply Chain Sustainability School, and welcome to our Embedding Sustainable Procurement webinar. Thrilled that you are all able to join this session. I think it's going to be really informative. Just speaking from the perspective of the school, Action Sustainability and WAP Sustainability, we were all very involved in the creation of ISO 2400, which is the ISO standard for sustainable procurement. So this is a topic that's very near and dear to our hearts, and I think today is going to be really insightful and hopefully provide a lot of value to you. So a little bit about me and a little bit of housekeeping. Like I said, I'm the operations manager for the supply chain school. So hopefully you all have accounts and you're getting familiar with the platform. We did just launch back in January, but it's great to see so many people taking up the platform and using our resources. It really is a great tool for anyone who's on any stage of their sustainability journey. So we're going to continue to host a lot of these free webinars. So very much encourage you to use the platform and sign on for our events in the future. So just very quickly, some housekeeping things. This session is being recorded and it will be put up as a resource on the Supply Chain School resource library, which will live on in perpetuity. So feel free to go back and have a look, or you can share with your colleagues if you found it insightful. You will also be sent the slides from today's session in PDF form, so you'll be able to reference back if there's anything that you want to go and have a look at. And of course, if you are accessing this module and you are marked as attended, you will receive a certificate of completion in your Supply Chain School dashboard. So do keep a lookout for that. If you are having any technical difficulty, encourage you to message the chat, or you can email me at info@supplychainschool.com. If you have to drop off, if there's anything that's gone wrong, just reach out to me and I'll be able to help you out. Enough about me. I'm going to pass over to Webley Bowles, who is our presenter for today. Webley is our sustainable procurement expert. You're in excellent hands. And yeah, take it away, Webley.
Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate that. Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us today for this Embedding Sustainable Procurement webinar. As Wendy said, my name is Webley Bowles. I am a Sustainability Director at WAP Sustainability. I am an architect, and so I focus on design, construction, and operations, and have worked in sustainability, energy efficiency programs from global Fortune 500 companies, state programs, to individual projects. At WAP, I lead the development of our embodied carbon code policy and programs, using a systems thinking approach to program development. So I am focused more on the policy side, but I have been involved in procurement policy for quite a while. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Go to the next slide. You can see my cute little picture there. All right, next slide, Wendy. I think you covered these already. So just remember, turn your camera off, stay muted, use the Q&A function. I would love to get your feedback throughout this. I'm gonna ask a couple questions along the way, so please go ahead and use that Q&A chat function to communicate. Next slide, we'll get into the agenda. So today we will explore the principles of sustainable procurement for the built environment and how to embed it in your organization using, as Wendy mentioned, ISO 20400. It's a standard and it was published in 2019. So we'll look at what do we mean when we use the term sustainable procurement, the different components of sustainable procurement, and the whys and hows of sustainable procurement. Next slide. Getting into the learning outcomes today, we're going to look at some of the key terminology used, understanding the drivers of sustainable procurement, understanding the demands for this within the building industry, and again, looking at ISO 20400's framework for sustainable procurement. Next slide. Before we get started, let's make sure that we all are comfortable with what we mean by sustainability. Next slide. There's a lot of definitions out there about what sustainability is. I really like the United Nations Brundtland Commission, which their definition is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. There's also the spheres of sustainability or the triple bottom line. There's also people, planet, profit, which is the three P's of sustainability. They're all kind of getting at the same thing. That this traditional model of the triple bottom line includes that social or people, which includes issues such as business ethics, labor standards, equal opportunities, and social inclusion. The environmental or the planet includes issues such as climate change, water consumption, the use of finite resources, waste, and biodiversity. And finally, that third one, the economic or profit, includes issues such as profitability, the local economy, and fair payment within supply chains. So we want to aim to achieve sustainable outcomes. The trick is to consider the triple bottom line or these three P's in the decision-making process. Next slide. And luckily there's guidance for it. So this is ISO 20400, and it helps companies to cultivate more sustainable practices throughout their supply chains by addressing that triple bottom line. Well, there's an ISO standard. It's really more of a guide on how to incorporate sustainability into your procurement practices because there's no certification with it. So if you're using ISO 20400, you'll develop a sustainable management policies for your supply chain, engage your employees, specifically the procurement team, and develop and improve procurement infrastructure. So within the school, there's a number of different resources and guides and case studies that will help you with your organization to better implement sustainable procurement. Next slide. I'm using the structure of ISO 20400 because it has some really good concepts to understand what sustainability is and what it might mean to you. So this is really a choose your own adventure, and you'll find what's right for your organization. But ISO 20400 lays out these 7 topics that should be addressed in sustainable procurement. The governance, which is the policies and procedures, the human rights, which ensures that humans are treated fairly, mitigating child labor or slave labor, and avoiding discrimination. The labor practices, which is the emphasis on life and safety considerations. The environment, which is about protecting the planet's resources. Fair operating practices encourages transparent and ethical behavior in the different supply chains you're working within. Consumer issues, like disclosing practices so the consumer is aware of the policies and actions that you're taking to be more sustainable. And then finally, the community, which is how you're impacting the greater community through local purchasing and supporting greener communities. Next slide. So as I mentioned, this standard is not a certifying standard, but it applies to a lot of different organizations because it's very adaptable. So if you're a general office and you only procure coffee and paper for your staff, you can still use it. If you're a manufacturer with complex widgets from raw materials from different continents, or a building contractor purchasing materials from design specifications, this framework will still apply. It's very adaptable. Next slide. The main goal of ISO 20400 is to provide companies with assistance on sustainable procurement. And it's a good time to say that sustainable procurement is really just good procurement. It's really just understanding the values of your organization. So ISO 20400 operates under these 4 main principles of understanding the basics of sustainable acquisition and social responsibility and what it means to your company, incorporating sustainability into the organization through the use of policy and strategy. It can be a top-down or bottom-up approach. Using engagement to organize all moving parts of the organization to improve sustainability, and implement sustainable practices throughout the entire process, and then dive into a more sustainable future through the evaluation and updates, kind of an ongoing process. So we're going to start by walking through each of these 4 principles, and next slide we will get started So, ooh, o- okay, got it. Little lag. So the first of the four principles is to understand what sustainability really means to your organization. So before embarking on a sustainability procurement policy, it's important to know why you're doing it. It's a bit of a choose your own adventure, like I mentioned. Understand what's important to your organization first and develop understand the drivers around it. Each driver is going to be different for each organization because we're all different. You may find that you have an aging workforce and you're not attracting the younger applicants because they are seeking opportunities that align with their need to address climate change. That's a very common thing that we've heard. So your main driver may be to make your business more attractive to younger generations. That's a simple driver. Next slide. The standard has you consider these four different topics under the fundamentals of sustainability. Within the principles, can your business demonstrate that you uphold your principles? Do you apply them when you're working with your supply chain? Within the core subjects, we looked at those previously, from human rights, fair operating practices, more. The different drivers of sustainability. I'm going to get to this more in just a minute. And the key considerations are managing risk and opportunity, making sure that you identify, prioritize, and manage the sustainability risks and opportunities within your organization and the supply chain. Which really sets the foundation for your policies and the strategies, helps you set the priorities. It's not one size fits all solution, as I mentioned. The due diligence and avoiding complicity means that you must take responsibility for the impact of your procurement activities and do all that you can do to prevent the harm and eliminate unethical practices wherever you can. And the last one in key considerations is exercising influence. And where possible, you can exercise your influence to ensure that the entire supply chain is coming with you on your sustainability journey. So those that your suppliers are also embedding requirements into their supply chain as well. Next slide. The standard offers 15 potential drivers for an organization to practice sustainable procurement. Here are some that are most relevant to the built environment sector. The US federal government has or had, it's not quite sure where their policies stand right now, but there are several guidelines, standards, and policies, and even laws that set the requirements for sustainable procurement at the federal level. The General Services Administration facilities requirements have recognized the risk and opportunities of sustainable building practices, and they've developed P100, the facility standard, which I believe is on, I'm just going to call it on hold at the moment. But it is something that has kind of set the stage for the industry in understanding where the federal government has been in the past and likely will go in the future. Manufacturers whose products meet these requirements really maintain a competitive edge to be eligible to be purchased by the federal government, which is the world's largest purchaser of products. So that's a very large example, but a smaller example, I have a friend who's a local blueberry farmer, and he moved to organic farming because he was concerned about leaving the soil better for the next generation who's going to take over his farm. So there's various levels of drivers, and you have to figure out what's driving your need for sustainable procurement. Next slide. Legislation is one of the largest drivers towards sustainability. Non-compliance can result in not being able to conduct business in a specific jurisdiction. So even pending legislation can encourage a business to get ahead of the requirements and gain that competitive advantage. In the US, there's 14 states that have some form of extender producer responsibility laws. These laws require that the manufacturers support the recycling of products that they manufacture. So, for example, in Oregon, producers of residential and commercial packaging, printing paper, writing paper, and food serviceware, so utensils, are required to join a producer responsibility organization. And through that, they're supposed to fund the end of life management of those materials, which includes processing and recycling. Similarly, by clean laws are another legislative action that may encourage the manufacturer to become more sustainable so that they can procure with that state. So this law uses the government procurement process to purchase lower embodied carbon building products. The Buy Clean, Buy Fair Act in Washington state requires that environmental and labor reporting for public building products. And the law promotes that transparency around spending, leverages the state's spending to produce low embodied carbon products, and promotes a high labor standards in manufacturing. So if you're selling carpet or steel in California, you still have a reason to care about the sustainability aspects of the products because California has an EPR requirement as for carpet, and they have a buy clean policy for low embodied carbon steel. Next slide. Next. Okay. Your organization may also be looking to reduce the risk at what comes from less predictable weather. So sustainability issues can really influence your brand, your value, your reputation, market share, and the risks associated with operating licenses. So the risks often lie deep within your supply chain. This comprehensive climate risk management is different from ISO 20400 standard, but it is aligned. The framework seeks to anticipate, avoid, and present all types of climate risks and plan for potential impacts. So consider the transportation path of your supply chain or the warehouses, locations where you store millions of dollars of products. Is the transportation route more difficult to navigate in the winter? Or is your warehouse located in a location that's prone to flood? Does it make sense to procure products made locally or avoid tariffs or maybe even war-prone areas? If you're a real estate investment trust, are you likely to buy an office in a high-risk area? Will you be able to get it insured now or maybe even into the future? There's a lot of considerations to look at when it comes to climate risk management, and doing an assessment will help you understand the priorities and the drivers there. Next slide. So I'm curious about your organization. What drives your need to embed sustainability as part of your supply chain activity? Go ahead and drop a note in the comments and share it with others. It's helpful to see what other people might be working on at this point. There's a perception that sustainable procurement is really only relevant to big operations and organizations, and that its principles become less relevant the further down the supply chain it goes. But that's not necessarily true. There's a lot of small steps that can be taken. Regardless of your geographic location, sector that you're working in, or position in the supply chain, you can all benefit from understanding the sustainable procurement practices. Within ISO 20400, it's a continuous improvement and guidance standard, so it helps to support organizations comply with current and prepare for the future. Next slide. So let's consider the policies and strategies on adopting sustainability and adapting to existing strategies. In the policies and strategies section, next slide. So when you're setting your strategies and policies, you need to ensure that they reflect not only on the risks and opportunities that you have identified, but also the culture and values of your organization, which are going to be unique. Although policy development is usually a top-down, you need to ensure that your processes are in place to capture your workers' and suppliers' contributions as well. So having buy-in throughout your organization at all levels can lead to greater chances of success. Next slide. When setting your organization's goals, you want to kind of contextualize them. It's important to adopt a policy in a way that can be embedded into the SMART objectives. You've probably seen this before, but this is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And these really become your key performance indicators or your KPIs for your supply chain, and they are what can be measured against it. Next slide. Several industry associations have developed voluntary reporting opportunities for designers and contractors that are seeking to design lower embodied carbon buildings and procure lower energy buildings as well. So that you might have seen some of these. The AIA 2030 commitment is for architects. MEP 2040 is for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers. And when signing on to these commitments, firms are asked to develop a plan, take action on projects, and often report back to that organizing body. For MEP 2040, firms are asked to establish a company plan for how they're going to implement lower embodied carbon design and products into their projects. They are also supposed to request low global warming potential refrigerants, request environmental product declarations, and participate in MEP 2040 forums to kind of keep that community going. These organizations provide the support for getting started. By offering these commitments, they provide a community, resources, and a reporting mechanism. Next slide. So Gensler is a global architecture firm, and they've actually signed on to the AIA 2030 challenge. They've developed their own sustainability requirements for their buildings and interiors that they design. They identified the top 18 commonly used construction products and set sustainability requirements for them. So while Gensler doesn't actually procure the products themselves, they're responsible for the procurement through their specifications. So they're committed to this because they are a signatory on AIA 2030. Their GPS policy aligns with our goals, understanding their supply chain, and really shows their leadership in the market. And we've seen a lot of manufacturers brag about being able to comply with this standard. Next slide. So I'm going to ask a similar question. What policies or actions can you implement to show your commitment? And go ahead and add that to the chat. Again, it can be big, it can be small. While these are often top-down actions, they can also happen from the ground up. How can you make your work more sustainable today? Maybe today is actually going to be the day that you learn how your copier can print on both sides of the paper. It's all these small actions that add up. Next slide. So we can look at enablers next. This is a term that's a little bit, we use this term a little bit differently in the US, but it's really about those that are working on it, the responsible parties. So when you're setting your strategies and policies, you need to ensure that they reflect not only the identified risks and opportunities, but also the cultures and values of the organization. So policy development is usually this top-down activity, and you just have to follow what that policy is. But having your workers and suppliers contribute to the objectives and strategies helps give you more buy-in throughout the organization and can lead to greater chances of success. Next slide. These policies and commitments go beyond just signing the policies that you need to actually implement. So it's important to define the roles, responsibility, the proposed timeline. Those are really the SMART goals that we talked about. This includes transparency, training, organizing, and organizational cultural shift. So we want to involve the staff in the new approaches through employee recognition and rewards when new concepts such as sustainability or resiliency is introduced into what might be long-standing practices and business as usual. Trainings and tools are really important to make sure that there's understanding. And again, I'm going to reiterate that sustainable procurement is really no different than your conventional procurement. Understanding the drivers, the KPI, or the key performance indicators, and the methodologies behind sustainability should build more comfort with the new metrics and ideas. Also, you can go to the next slide, it's fine. A few key sustainability champions can make all the difference within an organization. So as you host a charrette, you could host a charrette, for instance, to talk about why sustainability is important to staff and your clients. These company-wide meetings really help open the door for staff to talk about sustainability, use a common language, and even make recommendations in the future. So it's easier to tell your boss that you think a new product should be made with regenerative materials, or that you should investigate the fair wages of the manufacturing staff after you've had these discussions with everyone. Priorities, you may want to go through the same stakeholder engagement with suppliers as well. You can educate suppliers so they understand the needs and the role in achieving the goals. What is low embodied carbon concrete? I've said this a couple of times. I have not necessarily defined it because it might not be a driver for your organization. But if that is, when you ask for it, what do you expect of your concrete provider? Encouraging the suppliers to really engage in what you need is going to be important. And you can do that through the supply chain school and their resources. Some of the largest contractors in the UK couldn't get the sustainability products that they needed. And so the supply chain school was created to provide education and help bridge that gap, which is really cool. Next slide. Another way to enable people is through incentives. And I have a policy example. There's also internal policies as well. This is New Jersey's Low Embodied Carbon Concrete Leadership Act, also known as LECLA. It incentivizes concrete providers who procure low carbon concrete for state projects by giving them a tax credit when the product meets a low global warming potential value. So it's a low embodied carbon product. The program started last year, and it gives concrete producers who supply at least 50 yards of concrete for a state-funded project a tax credit. That's a big incentive. The GWP limits for low-carbon concrete also are incentivized during bidding. If you meet the requirements of the low embodied carbon concrete, you get a 5% bid discount as well. So that can be a lot for a small project. Next slide. So what about your organization? You can throw this in the chat. Who are the champions that everyone trusts and wants to follow? Maybe that's you because you're on this webinar right now. Add it to the chat. What are the realistic goals that stakeholders can get behind and your supply chain school can actually comply with? Next slide. To set the priorities, you do need to know what your main issues are. In many cases, we're talking about carbon. So we want to understand where are the large carbon issues, I will call them, within your organization. You may want to start by studying the GHG emissions within through heat mapping. And I know Supply Chain School has some more webinars about this. But heat mapping, you can kind of quickly identify which company activities are associated with your highest carbon emissions, and you can start to prioritize and develop steps to reduce those emissions in those categories. The process starts by collecting data about your operations. This is energy use for your building operations, work travel, employee commuting, purchase goods and services, and your waste streams. So capturing all upstream activities is those that support your business operations, and the downstream activities are those that your customers use. This will give you a full picture of the GHG emissions your company is responsible for. For many contractors, Scope 3 emissions are going to be your highest category. These are termed goods and services. That's the terminology in this framework. These emissions are from all of the materials that you purchase for construction. So if you're a manufacturer of a building product, the scope will help you consider how your product is used and the emissions associated with it's no longer in your control as well. So with any plan, it's really important to start with the realistic goals. And this may mean setting smaller goals to kind of test new systems and ensure that the team is on board with the changes. But again, it kind of depends on your culture. If you have a culture that's kind of all in, maybe that's the best place to start. So the ISO 20400 standard includes the process for setting these priorities, and there's additional resources on the website. You go to the next slide. And just like any good procurement process, you want to engage internal and external stakeholders so that you can measure and adjust the program consistently. And a grievance mechanism is within your normal procurement system, then your sustainable procurement system is no different. You want to make sure that you're capturing kind of lessons learned, what's not working, what is, and adjust. Next slide. So the fourth and last category of this standard is the actual procurement process. So let's get into implementation. Next slide. This is where we take all the ideation and really put it into practice. So we are reviewing and learning. This is a continuous process. What staff learned about general sustainability may need to be refreshed when it comes to understanding the actual policy for your organization. Planning is really important because how are you going to communicate the requirements with staff and your suppliers? Integrating sustainability into the specifications requires that your master specifications are updated, and it's not just on the sustainability projects that have these new requirements. When selecting suppliers, you may already have contractors you work with who actually meet the requirements, you just don't know. You also may need to train suppliers who want to comply or even select new suppliers altogether. And then finally, managing the contract. Once you have the contract with the supplier, we need to make sure that what was specified was delivered and that the goals were actually met. So we've done a lot of planning, but there's always more to do. So incorporate sustainability priorities into your process as early as possible and start transitioning internal engagements to understand what your current suppliers and potential marketplace have to contribute. This may mean updating your design specifications with new sustainability requirements. Maybe you send letters to suppliers that you work with frequently, letting them know of the new requirements and the expected timeline for compliance. Recently did this with one of WAP's corporate clients, where we surveyed the suppliers to understand where they currently stand and what their plans were in the future. We also sent a letter to inform them of what we're going to need in the future, which was an environmental product declaration within 5 years, and the resources that we would provide them, the education, we had meetings, and we connected them with LCA providers. We also want to update some of the existing documents. So the request for proposals, and make sure that those include the sustainability requirements. We see our RFPs for zero energy buildings will often state the EUI, or the energy use intensity, as a target. And this kind of transparency provides an opportunity for the bidder to really illustrate their experience with that exact request. And then additional analysis, depending on your organization, you may need some additional research or market analysis to understand what's right for you. Next slide. So to ensure that your requirements are realistic, objective, and verifiable, and that there's alignment with the sustainability standards with engineers and consultants, we want to look at these three different types of requirements. The first is the physical or descriptive requirements, which specify a characteristic of goods and services. For example, this is going to be recycled content or renewable content within a product. The performance requirements are going to be kind of the standards of care, the number of patients for a social care service, your delivery time, the amount of waste generated, or your carbon emissions reductions values. The functional requirements are going to kind of define the proposed function to be filled in the goods or services. So that could be the strength and durability of a product or energy/fuel efficiency of it. Several architecture firms have been required to meet sustainability requirements due to jurisdictional policies, like we mentioned, the buy clean requirements that we see in many states. And those firms found it easier to update their master specifications to incorporate things like no smoking on site or low embodied carbon concrete. And now that's required on every project. It's not just those that need to comply, but they have moved their firm so that all projects have to comply with these new standards. I also want to mention eco labels here, because it's really helpful to use the requirements of eco labels, but it's also important to understand exactly what it does or does not cover to make sure that it is right for your goals and your drivers. And pointing your suppliers to the standard behind those labels can also be a really great practice. Next slide. Before selecting suppliers, we want to make sure that we've clearly communicated the requirements, and there's several documents that may be able to do this. The requests for qualifications and requests for proposals are really the owner's issuance of the requirements. The pre-qualifications and bids are the bidder's response to how they're going to meet those owner's requirements. And as with any requirements, they should be linked back to the sustainability specifications. I haven't said that enough already. Hopefully that's being driven home. The RFQ might ask the supplier to explain their history with the topic and provide examples. And that gives the bidder the opportunity to explain their experience supplying fair trade or certified wood and list how they have vetted those products in the past. And the RFQ would list like those hard project requirements, such as EUI that I mentioned before. And setting those requirements up front really shows both parties to explain their needs and their experience. Next slide. There's a tendency for procurement and organizations to embrace a culture of select and forget. So we don't just want to develop a policy and kind of forget about it in implementation. It really needs to be managed. So managing those contracts and the supplier relationships is important. So you may have a pre-bid meeting to clarify what's in that contractual goals. For example, if a product needs an EPD or environmental product declaration to comply with lead requirements, you want to review that and confirm that the contractor understands what should be submitted. We also want to ensure that the purchases meet the specification. There's a typical process for that through the submittal review, which always reviews back to the specs. We want to maintain that two-way communication to ensure that 360-degree dialogue between the supply chain and the business to create openness, transparency, ongoing collaboration to then look for innovation and improvement. This provides the opportunity to review and learn and understand what needs to be adjusted. And lastly, I want to mention here that it's really important to celebrate success. It's easy just to be like, yes, we met the basic requirements, but when you're changing, it's really important to identify who has performed well and give recognition, even if it's just a simple thank you. Next slide. So where are you going to start with sustainable procurement? I'm curious to know. Throw it in the chat. Where are you going to start? How are you going to ensure that your goals have been met? Will you have a mechanism for reiterating and updating the process? Yes, heat mapping is always important. Next slide. I've mentioned refining the process a couple times, but this is always important with anything. We want to make sure that we're keeping our plan fresh and so it doesn't go stale. So it's constantly being updated to what we need. At the end of the procurement cycle, it's a really good time to reflect on those lessons learned and kind of identify any issues that came up and avoid them on future projects. But likewise, we want to develop case studies for those projects for successful implementation. Next slide. All right, we are rounding out the session here with this recap. If you remember, we started out by defining sustainable procurement with a triple bottom line and using ISO 20400 as a framework for embedding sustainability considerations into your procurement process. The standard is really flexible. It allows your organization to develop a sustainability procurement plan, and it encourages that you address the governance, the human rights, labor practices, the environment, fair operating practices, consumer issues, as well as community. And these are all set under those four main major categories of fundamentals, policy and strategy, enablers, and the procurement process. This likely is not a foreign concept. You have likely have a procurement process in place. And if you haven't looked at your planner for a while, it can be easy to forget about the small details. But embedding sustainability can be challenging because there's some new language and there's shift in business as usual in some cases. But the rewards to your business can include improved profitability, increased business, and improve business resilience. So increased stakeholder interest in how businesses are operating and how they're treating their supply chains are also putting pressure on organizations to ensure that sustainable procurement is embedded. So there's more and more requests for this. Consider what you can do to develop your sustainable procurement outcomes and how they can help your clients meet their requirements as well. Next slide. We have a few resources for you that we will include in the email when we send it over after the session. Hopefully you've already jumped over to the next slide, the ISO 20400. It is a wealth of information. They have some really great case studies over there. Next slide. As does the supply chain school. They have a self-assessment tool that you can test your understanding of the topic. Next slide. And some really cool case studies that I encourage you to check out. Next slide. I thank you for your time today. You are welcome to reach out to me. I hope that you learned something new about sustainable procurement. I hope that there's something that you can implement today. If you have any questions, you can add them to chat and we can answer them. And while you're adding those items to the chat, I want to remind you that you will receive a feedback survey at the end of the session and in the follow-up email, and we really appreciate your insights. I'm going to turn it back over to Wendy. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Leslie. That was a really great session. I hope you all enjoyed that. Just a reminder that the chat is open for any questions. I can see a comment here about selecting suppliers in terms of adopting sustainable supplier product and material offerings. Yeah, I think that is absolutely a huge issue for procurement professionals. Webley, did you want to elaborate on that at all, or?
Yeah, there's multiple ways of doing it. If you are starting from scratch, having those requirements up front is really helpful so that it's not a relationship where you're then asking them to change. If there's something that's, I haven't read this whole comment here, especially with the green premium with no universal consensus. Yeah, it's always important to ask around. This is where some of those commitments can be helpful. The RMI contractor commitment has forums and there's communities to ask around for different suppliers. And the more information that we can share about who you're working with will help others as well.
Great. Yeah. And I mean, I'd like to go back to the comment about heat mapping, not to, keep banging on about it. But when you do sort of see something visually where you've got your categories of spend versus your influence and impact that they have on sustainable procurement, but how it impacts your goals. I mean, I know that it can be a really useful tool in terms of like, okay, well, where can we have the most significant impact? Where can we focus? Where are the gaps in our supply chain? So yeah, no, I think heat mapping really is a useful tool. Okay, great.
I also see here in Thomas's question, a question about creating the buy-in for internal for eating the delta. So this is assuming that there is an initial capital investment, and there isn't always initial capital investment. There can be, but this is where being very clear about your drivers is important, because if your driver is the thing that's making you do this, you kind of point back to this and say, hey, we have this goal. We should be doing this because of this goal. And there might be a middle ground if there is a large capital investment that you move forward with. So an example of this is maybe you want to procure more sustainable wood, but the project might not have a budget for it at this moment. So maybe you just go halfway or maybe a quarter of the way, but you're moving towards purchasing more and more of that sustainable wood.
Okay, great. We'll just give the participants just a few more minutes to ask any further questions, just in case people are still typing. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a topic that's not going away. I mean, not to repeat what's already been said, but again, sustainable procurement is just good procurement. If I could tattoo that on my forehead, I absolutely would. I think we'll leave the session there. Again, just to reiterate, the slides and recording of the session are going to be sent around to all the attendees. Would strongly encourage you to check out the sustainable procurement resources that we have on the supply chain school. We have a great e-learning module, short little 2-minute animation, great to get buy-in from maybe those of you who have colleagues in the area who are in this world who may not have bought into sustainability. Great little bite-sized resources. And some links will be sent to you in the email as well. Just want to thank everyone for attending, and thank you, Webley, for this great presentation. Encourage you all to sign up for our future events, and we'll give you 15 minutes of your day back, and we'll send you on your way this afternoon. So thanks again, and hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.